Twilight Monk is a beautiful, hand-drawn metroidvania that has a lot of heart and plenty of potential. But is that enough for gamers to want to play this title? Hi there, my name is The Dove, and I'm a dork who loves video games. And today, I want to talk about Twilight Monk, and whether it might be a game you would enjoy. So let's get started. The indie developer Aquatic Moon consists of a handful of employees. Among the few is lead director, concept design, and writer Trent Kanuga. Trent is the creator of the comic book and graphic novels Twilight Monk, which has a shared universe with his first comic book series, Creed, which he made in his teenage years. He has worked in the industry of video games for decades, and has been on the visual development side of some games of note. Diablo 3, World of Warcraft, League of Legends, just to name a few, in an impressive resume. This is the second main title to be released under Aquatic Moon, and if you've seen their first title, you can actually see some of the ideas taken from that retro platformer. But let's talk about Twilight Monk. At the end of the day, it's fun. It's not perfect, but what it might lack in some mechanics here and there, it definitely makes up for with its artistic cells, backgrounds, and overall setting. The platforming controls are responsive and never make you feel like you have to be perfect in order to progress the game. It's also a short and sweet title. Some Metroidvania experts might be able to finish this one just in a sitting or two, but for the rest of us mere mortals, this one will continue to progress quickly and never really wears out its own welcome. The setting of the game comes from the graphic novels that share the same title. To those like myself who may not be fans of the graphic novel, the setting is a mystical land where they mix all the elements from your monk protagonist with some wizards, dragons, and gun-slinging rats from the Old West. It's a little bit all over the place, but it feels right in this dungeon crawl feeling Metroidvania platformer. If you are a fan of the graphic novels, obviously this is probably going to be a feast for the senses. There are plenty of indie games out there trying to utilize hand-drawn cells, but Twilight Monk separates itself from the rest of the pack with some gorgeous hand-drawn settings and characters. And with all this source material, there's a good variation of enemies. Yeah, there's a few repainted enemies from the previous level here and there, but a grand majority of them are very interesting and honestly just really cool to look at. The animations might be a little simple, but if anything, it added to the feel that you're almost playing in an actual real graphic novel. It just made the actual illustrations look that much more amazing. You play as Raziel Tenza, a Twilight Monk and wielder of the Phantom Pillar. Your goal is to locate the dastardly Nox, who is trying to also locate the 3 storied rings of Triskelion, and your whole task is to get there before he does. The chase works as a plot driver and helps keep players from getting too lost in the Metroidvania style map. Essentially a guide, but there are still markers on the map, so if you get completely lost, you'll be able to figure out where to go. I can't stress enough how enjoyable the overall story was without getting too bogged down on its own lore and details. If you're like me and haven't read any of the graphic novels, then you might not know exactly what's going on right away, but you don't have to waste half the opening act trying to read through dialogue and backstory to figure it out. The game keeps a really good pace, and it keeps its explanations and overall plot simple but effective. When it comes to the game controls, both for platforming and combat are pretty solid, although minimalistic maybe to a fault. Most importantly, I never felt cheated though in combat or platforming, and the action and the tightness of the controls always came through when you needed it. Everything is pretty much centered around the pillar that's stuck to the chain you swing around. In terms of combat, you can swing that forward to unleash some powerful attacks. For the platforming aspect, it's used to help you get to some hard-to-reach spots. And the idea of this thing is fantastic, and platforming-wise, it does help out. But combat, now I need to preface by saying 2 things here. 1, I enjoyed this game, and 2, there are talismans you can add to your character which give you different styles of attacks. One in particular that I found was a more ranged attack with the pillar that you could place it on the ground and then kick it to get a couple extra feet and a little more attack power. So there could be some variations to what I say if you find the right talisman. Now, back to what I'm talking about. The game's combat. It's literally one-dimensional. You can add a ranged attack which gives you arc at times, but your main attack is just swinging the pillars straight forward. You can kick without the pillar, but it does minimal damage and is really pointless as it leaves you incredibly vulnerable to enemies. So you're left with a one-dimensional attack which never upgrades to some kind of combo. I kept waiting and waiting, and 2/3 of the way through the game, I was just shocked that there was no standard attack that raised the level of your swing or made some kind of combo-powered hit. When I first saw this game, I was hoping for some kind of two-dimensional God of War nutso combat system, but this game just stuck to that one attack. Like I said, there's talismans to change it up a little bit, and maybe I just haven't found the right one, but if it's not part of the standard process, it kind of leaves the game, like I said, a little minimalistic in the combat. And that kind of stands out most of all when you finally get the grappling hook ability. Connecting to each grappling hook can be a gigantic pain in the ass, as you have to time your hit at the exact right moment across that one plane. It's not the end of the world, as there's only a handful of spots where you'll absolutely need to use it to progress, but since it was a finicky and hard to get the exact right moment ability, I just had to mention it. It just felt like more of a chore most of the time than a fun new ability. At the end of the day, not the end of the world. Combat and platforming was still enjoyable, just made it feel a little bit more retro at times. The ambient and chill music has a little bit of variety, but it's always just chilling there in the background. Much like the detailed art, this game's music goes along to create a very immersive experience. It really felt like I was being swept away in a graphic novel that I was taking an active part in. It all came together to create a great atmosphere that kept me immersed for the most part. I think the biggest break from immersion was the fact that the game was not that difficult. Now, I definitely recommend this game for a certain type of player, and I think that type of player is someone who likes those old platformers or metroidvanias, and hasn't played one in a minute. Look, the only gamers I wouldn't recommend Twilight Monk to are the hardcore Metroidvania fans. You know, the ones who find Hollow Knight or the likes of Nine Souls to be a big yawn when it comes to difficulty. For those folks, this game is just not going to hit that proverbial spot. But for the rest of us, I think you could enjoy this short and sweet title. It has a lot of heart and great atmosphere. And what's even more cool is you get to walk around that amazing atmosphere in more of a Final Fantasy or one of the early Zelda type games feel, where you walk around in a top-down view, and when an enemy approaches or you enter a new map, you switch to the Metroidvania style 2D side-scroller. Other games have done this, but I just feel like this worked perfectly with Twilight Monk. Now, almost all dialogue is presented in text format, and before some of you just keep hitting the next button as fast as possible, let me tell you that in all the games that utilize this form, this one keeps things short, sweet, and to the point. I don't think there was one dialogue where I felt like someone was yammering or I just wanted to hit that button to skip. It kept that feel of being in an actual comic book style universe with the quick wit and a quip ready for every occasion. It's one of the few indie games that doesn't fall in love with itself when it comes to its own lore. In the case of Twilight Monk, it's there to help paint the picture and set a really amazing atmosphere. What shines through the most is the art, the atmosphere, and the solid gameplay. Yes, there could be more added to the combat, and I think a spike in the base difficulty would help a bit, but this is still a solid title. Like I said, I don't recommend this for hardcore Metroidvania gamers. While I think most of the aspects of Twilight Monk are fundamentally sound outside one or two mechanics, those who really need that kind of challenge might not find that here. But with all the aesthetics, the atmosphere, and with platforming controls that are tight, this one is one I recommend for fans who might want to get back into the genre, or if you're just looking for a more chill, relaxed game. This is a gorgeous title, and there's a lot to explore, and a fun story to enjoy. You can check out Twilight Monk on both Steam and on Switch. Thanks for watching. Feel free to leave a comment or hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider clicking the subscribe button now. We have more videos like this and have a weekly gamer news podcast called The Gamer Buff, with all the latest gaming news. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, this is the Dove.